Welcome back to this week's episode of Racing Through Canada's Past. I'm your host, John Morrison. On this week's program, we're going to look into the rich motorsports history of British Columbia. Being from Ontario, I've been accustomed to the motorsports landscape here. Though I like to consider myself a history buff, I realize that some of it is just small tidbits I've acquired over time. I'm excited to look into the history of stock car racing in British Columbia, and I hope you are as well. Let's get into it. The first record of any motorsports event taking place in British Columbia took place on the streets of Vancouver in 1909. At the time, Vancouver was rapidly growing, and motorsports were gaining traction as automobiles became more common. The first organized event took place in 1910 on the streets of Vancouver Island and was put on by the Vancouver Automobile Club. The people of Victoria were infatuated with cars as races would take place at the Willow Fairgrounds starting in 1912. Drivers would actually compete on alternate weekends to the horse for events that took place. Now, the first official sanctioned race at the Speedway took place on August 16th, 1919, and was put on by the Victoria Automobile Club. This event drew many racers from the Northwest, including some Americans. Promoters took huge ads out in papers, and there was a nice buzz in the town. And something that I actually I have the page up of Victoria Auto Racing Hall of Fame and Museum, was that there was actually a pass that people could take. There it is. I'm going to screw this up, and I'm so sorry. Eskew Malt and Nanaimo Railway were involved in the promotion of this event, that the railway offered a special discount to those who wanted to go down to the island and watch the race. The train pass purchased on Friday was still valid on Monday, meaning you can stay the weekend in Victoria and the money was being spent at the local stores, restaurants, and hotels. Now that's such a cool way to do some promotion, right? And when you get promoters like that who want to see the sport succeed, that's pretty cool. But Willow Fairgrounds holds roughly 2,500 people in the grandstand seating. But many more would be able to watch the race on this half-mile dirt oval as you could sit around the outside of it. For the prestigious event to enter, it was $1.10. Grandstand seating was $1.65, and for a box, it was $2.60, which would equal in today's amount of $20.45 for general admission. Grandstand seating was $30.67, and box seating was $40.34. Now, that seems very affordable, but back then, that was not the case. Thankfully, the race was very well received, and many in attendance were there to watch the spectacle. Drivers who competed at Willow Fairgrounds were known to be competing in front of large crowds. Reports would suggest over 4,000 people in attendance. That doesn't include around the outer edge of the track as well, and crews and stuff like that. But on May 22nd, 1920, the site of another remarkable race in British Columbia history, as the Americans invaded the Speedway, but this time with more advanced machines. The cars were lighter and faster. Jack Ross drove a 16-valve stud special that reached speeds of 120 miles an hour around Los Angeles Motor Speedway. People came far and wide to see what the stud special was all about. Also on the card, saw some motorcycle races, entertaining the crowd before the big race. Now, the one cool thing I like about that, and we're going to dive into another episode down the road, is motorcycle racing. And if you guys have never seen a flat track event, I highly recommend it. I used to go to one at the Paris Fairgrounds. They used to hold one over the course of the weekend. Very, very small track. I think it was like an eighth of a mile. I'm looking it up right now, but it wasn't that big of a facility. The track wasn't, it was a 1/8 mile track. I'm going to throw a couple pictures up here so you guys can check it out as well. But yeah, I used to go to it. I saw some great racing there, but I've seen the motorcycle races on at Flamborough Downs too. And like I said, if you get a chance to go watch them. They're fun. They're exciting, and they seem like a great time out. The night before the race, though, the promoters got all the cars in front of the fans to promote the race. There was actually a parade that started at the legislative building and toured the entire town of Victoria, British Columbia. To get tickets to this race, you had to go to your local car or repair dealership to get hands on the ticket to this event. And one of the cool things I saw when I was researching this was that is such an innovative way to get people out to the racetrack. You bring it into the community, you get the people of the community involved, such as your car and repair dealerships. You know how like it's another way avenue for people who may not know about racing to be able to come, because people need to go to the garage. What better way than to for the garage to be able to sell some tickets? As the 1920s roared on, racing in British Columbia had boomed with tracks like Langford Speedway had opened in 1937, a little bit later, obviously in the 20s, but more into the 30s. Langford Speedway opened in 1937 and it was built by Jack Taylor with the help from the British Columbia Automobile Sports Association in the community of Langford. The Speedway's popularity grew well before a race was even held on the grounds, with news reaching the U.S. in 1936. Jack had no issues getting drivers to come and try their luck at the local show and compete at the local shows as well, as the community filled out the 2,000-seat grandstand. A little bit about Langford Speedway. It was a three-eighth of a mile dirt oval in 1936. It was then in 1937, it was paved over and became the first paved oval track in Canada. The track would run from 1937 to 1950. Sadly, during World War II, racing was paused at the Speedway. Now, in 1946, racing did resume, but under new ownership from Bruce Passmore. And thankfully, he reopened the Speedway. But unfortunately, the government closed the Speedway in 1950 and rezoned the land to build a new elementary school for the next. To build a new elementary school. For the next 4 years, racing on the island would become to a halt as drivers would look for a new place to race. For 4 years, racing was dormant until Western Speedway opened up in 1954. When the track first opened, it was a dirt three-eighth of a mile oval that was carved by hand by track owner A.J. Cotton on 68 acres of land at the southern point of Victoria Island. The track held its first race on May 22nd, 1954, with 3,000 cheering spectators in attendance. People came from all over to watch these Indy-style cars do battle at speeds nearing 80 miles an hour. Khan had kept his ad simple. There was no advertisement around the track or even any gimmicks, just racing like it was meant to be. Over the years, ownership had changed as AJ Khan sold the track in 1966 to a local businessman, and then it was bought in 1988 by Frank Willey, Reg Midgley in 1983, and in 1999, Bill Smith Sr. took over as promoter. In 2021, the track was purchased by Baston Development Corporation and Strand Holdings, with the track changing its name from Western Speedway to West Shore Speedway because of legal matters. 2022 was the track's final year, and after 68 years, it made way for housing developments. And actually, if you guys if you guys have an Apple, you guys can actually go and see where West Shore Speedway is. I don't think they have actually started building on the land yet. I'm actually bringing up a map as we currently speak. See if I can find anything. I kind of have an idea of where it is, but like I don't think I'm gonna find it, unfortunately. No, that's not it. Where is that? I found it at Western Speedway in Australia. I'm gonna have to look for that later. I'm hopefully gonna have a photo up during this part here. So if I can find it, I'll put it up for you guys. But the track hosted many special events, and actually, such as the NASCAR Winston West Series between 1970 and 1982, and 10 NASCAR Northwest Series races between 1986 and 1989. The CASCAR West Series raced there in 19, sorry, the CASCAR West Series raced in 2001 and 2002 at the Speedway. Some notable big names in racing made trips to the Speedway such as Bobby Allison, Janet Guthrie, as well as Herschel McGriff, just to name a few. We're going to pause on the history of a couple of the earlier tracks there, and we're going to focus on some of the earlier drivers that have come out of British Columbia as well. Now, unfortunately, both these drivers had a tragic end to their racing career, to their life, unfortunately, but we're going to learn about it. Going forward, though, this is how when we start these off, we're going to break down a few of these um, earlier stuff that happened in the province, a couple of early drivers, and then we're going to recircle back, and then we're going to start diving into more of the tracks in their history, and if they're still around, if they're not around, the reasons why they closed, stuff like that. So I'll fill you guys in again at the end here, but some notable drivers to come out of British Columbia, including Billy Foster. He was born in British Columbia and had actually dropped out of high school to pursue racing. In 1963, Billy won the Canadian American Modified Racing Association in its first season. Billy also went back to back in 1963 and 1964 to compete in the Utah Copper Cup. And actually, he won both those years. Foster then moved on to the USAC Championship Series, racing from 1964 to 1966, with 28 starts, including the 1965 and the 1966 Indianapolis 500. In his 2 seasons, he scored 10 top 10s with the best finish of second at Atlanta. Foster would attempt to competing in the NASCAR Grand National Series in 1966, competing at Riverside International Raceway. But unfortunately, while practicing for the 1967 race, he had lost control after a brake drum failed and his car hit the retaining wall and rolled. The momentum of the collision of the wall caused Foster's head to strike the wall, ultimately passing away from his injuries at just 29 years old. That's a sad way to end your life. We always talk about safety, and again, that's one of those things you got to look out for your safety, and we've come such a long way, obviously, since then, and we're going to continue moving forward. The next notable driver out of British Columbia actually wasn't even born there, but he grew up there. He was actually a native of Australia, and early on, his family had moved and settled into Vancouver. Bob Mclean started his professional career in 1957, driving for MGA, competing in the Westwood racing circuit. In 1961, Bob had attended Rob Walker's motor racing stables at Finmar Aerodrome in England. In his first trip out, he completed 3 stages, coming back at a later date to finish the remaining stages. At the completion of his training, Mclean had actually turned the fastest lap ever by a student. In 1962, Bob moved to the BMC A Series engine number 101. From 1962 to 1963, sorry, Bob had won 19 out of 22 starts. And like I said, just like Billy, Bob had passed away driving during the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1966. Bob had just taken over for fellow Canadian Jean Ouellette, driving a Ford GT40, and that was right in the middle of the Ford versus Ferrari battle. Next time we revisit British Columbia, we will talk more about the speedways and their roles in motorsports in British Columbia history. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Racing Through Canada's Past. Next time out, we are going to move over to Alberta to check out where racing started in the province and some of its earliest drivers. We'd love to hear your feedback on the show. Feel free to drop your comments below on YouTube or Spotify. Heck, even message us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear your stories if you got them as well. Until next week, have a great week. See you guys later. Bye now.
You can find Jomo Media and Promotions on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and at jomomedia.ca. Until next time, keep your engines running and your belts tight.